Just do something to tell you who I am, you know? Yeah.
Today's post is going out on this idea that I hear a lot where people say, fat calories are different from protein calories and carbohydrates, and calories are different from this kind of calories. The fact is, there's no such thing as different calories. A calorie really is just a calorie regardless of where it's coming from. And to illustrate this point, I want to give you an idea of exactly what calories are and where they really come from. Because as soon as I hear people say, well, carbohydrate calories are different than fat calories, I'm like, you really don't know what a calorie actually is, do you? Because I used to say that, and I never knew what they actually were until I learned this simple lesson here. First and foremost, understand where calories come from. It ain't from food. Calories do not come from food. Yes, we get them from food, but where does the food get it? To begin with, calories, if you ask a lot of people, like, what is a calorie exactly? And they'll say, well, it's a unit of energy. And that right there should be the big red flag of exactly. A calorie is a unit of energy. It's not a unit of food. Calories are not food. We get calories from food, but they are not food. They are not the same thing. Calories are a unit of energy, and like all energy on the planet, it only comes from one single source, the sun. You, my friend, are solar powered, believe it or not. Now, I know you can't go out and sun yourself in the beautiful sunshine all day and then be like, oh good, now I don't need to eat dinner or anything. We lack that ability, which is technically called photosynthesis. But plants have it, which is why we consume them. So the energy comes directly from the sun, comes to the plant, and the plant takes the energy, and it's got these two resources. It's got water, H2O, and it has CO2 in the air. So what it does is it has, through photosynthesis, this amazing ability to take the hydrogen atom off the water and the carbon atom off the CO2. So we have this hydrogen and carbon, and it can bond the energy from the sun between the two. Now this right here is the basic building block that creates the stuff we consume, we think is food. Fat, protein, and carbohydrate. They all have these hydrogens bonded to carbon. The waste product, of course, is the oxygen off of that. So when we say things like plants give off oxygen and everything like that, that's what we're talking about. That's the, quote, waste product of photosynthesis. So now we've got in the plant this hydrogen bonded to carbon with the energy from literally the sun. The key here is this is not where our calories come from. This is the calorie. Well, it's not, one atom or one molecule of this is not a calorie. It's a collection of them to equal 1 calorie. But the calorie is the physical energy, okay? And that physical energy is the same regardless of how you're consuming it. It's the same exact energy, whether it's a deep fried Twinkie hot dog or organic filet salmon salad or anything like that. It's the same energy, okay? The only difference is how much of it in various foods. And of course, when we consume it, so we have this hydrogen, energy bonded carbon, we break that open. It's just like using a battery. This is a battery. Food is a battery. This is the electricity. The calories are the electricity. So it's a good analogy. Calories are to food what electricity is to batteries. Okay, so it's saying, fat calories are different than protein calories and so forth. That's like saying double A electricity is different than, single A electricity, double or triple A electricity or whatever. May not be the best analogy. I don't know too much about batteries, but it's the same kind of deal. Okay, you don't get electricity from just batteries. You got to think of electricity. You can still have batteries, but no electricity. This is how come some foods have a lot of calories and some foods have less calories. You can have a battery with very little electricity in it. So anyway, we use this to resynthesize ATP, which is the actual process that we use to get energy from the sun. But then we've got these two things still hanging around, which of course we breathe in, that oxygen, that was a waste product here, and it just goes full cycle. So this bonds right back to the oxygen that you breathe in, you breathe out, you sweat and you urinate, that H2O, and then of course you're breathing out the CO2, and the whole cycle just keeps going and going and going. So the lesson is calories are energy, they're not food. Now that doesn't necessarily mean what do you eat for foods doesn't matter. It does, because one of the biggest influences towards your calorie balance is the foods that you eat. And people who, it's so funny because they'll say things like, fat calories are different than protein calories and everything. But then they'll go right along the logic of why it's different and go right into basically restating that it really is about calories in and calories out, and how their special diet or whatever is because if you eat certain foods, then you tend to eat less. Or if you do this a certain way, then you tend to just expend more calories, and it causes that calorie balance to shift. So it really is, yes, about calories in and calories out. And no, there is no difference between the calories in fat and the calories in sugar and the calories in whatever, but the foods themselves are different, and they do have an influence, not a cause though. Okay, there's nothing about sugar that causes weight gain. There's nothing about, organic protein that causes weight loss or anything. It's an influence. We gotta be very careful about over-relying on an influence. Okay, there's no promise in an influence. It's just a piece of the puzzle versus a cause, which is absolute, factual, and never has any sort of a deviation from it. Calories in and calories out is the cause of how much you weigh. So yes, food matters, but there is no difference between fat, protein, and carbohydrate or alcohol calories, because this is the same regardless of how it's coming from, because it only has that source, and unless you're getting it from, I don't know, maybe a different sun or a star off in another galaxy or something, the calories aren't going to be any different. Till then, be fit, live free. So lately I've been on a bit of a kick on really trying to improve or to progress my push-ups. Going with more of the convict conditioning ideas of how do I get closer and closer to that one-arm push-up sort of deal. And I really don't want to fall into the trap that I see so many people do, where they're like, check out my sweet one-arm push-up, and they splay their feet wider than the English Channel, and they got their one arm here, and their arm bends like, this much, and they got their body like twisting. It's like, I got the shoulder close to the ground. Wasn't that awesome one-arm push-up? It's crap. I see those things and I'm like, oh God, I do not want to be like that. My goal for the one-arm push-up is literally like you lay down on the floor, feet are together, hand is underneath you, one arm behind you, and you make it look dead on exactly like a regular push-up, just with one arm. No technical modifications whatsoever, except for maybe hand placement. That's it. That's what I want, because I never see anybody do that. So I figure that's got to be pretty freaking sweet. So anyway, I realized very quickly that if I keep my hands at like this width, I'm never gonna get there because the arm is out to the side and there's a tremendous amount of torque and twist that happens, requiring the splayed feet and everything. And it's so much more difficult that way. And I started to realize, well, if I have my hand more on my center line, then that'll be much easier from that torquing perspective. So I started working more towards closer hand positions, but I started noticing tenderness in the wrists and the elbows, all these sorts of things. So I figured I'm just going to go right to the source, and I wrote up Paul Wade, author of Convict Condition, and I said, what do I do about this? Am I doing something funky or anything? And he wrote back, and I wanted to share that with you. Number one, he writes back, I bet you're used to shoulder width exercises like the old dips, bulk up the torso and stuff, but they do little to condition the elbows, wrists, and forearms and the joints, which is right. I've been doing a lot of the wider stuff, haven't really been focusing on the narrow stuff. The tendons and everything will take a little bit longer for them to catch up, okay? Go careful. We're dealing with leverage, so even a slight inwards movement of the hands during a one-arm press will exponentially increase the forces thrown on the wrist. All right, so basically it's like as we're getting even a little closer in, there's a lot more tension on the joints to deal with. Okay? I always use an oblique hand position, fingers pointed slightly towards the opposite shoulder. Okay, I started doing that a little bit. I think one of the reasons I gave up on that was because I was doing too much of a twist. So ever so slight is what I'm finding works well. Progression. An inch, a half inch each week or weeks. Tendons adapt slowly, slower than the muscles. So be patient. So instead of saying, okay, I was here, now I'm trying to do them like this, I'm literally just tiny, itty, bitty little increments each week. And finally, he goes on to say, it's worth it. Once your wrists and forearms will accommodate such powerful close movements, you can kiss forearms and elbow pain goodbye. Good. And it'll allow you to express much greater strength in the shoulder width stuff like your dips and your push-ups. So if you are looking to really get serious about the advanced push-ups, I hope that helps you, and let me know how your journey is coming along down below. Thank you, Paul, for your input. Thoughts down below. Till then, be fit.